So are buyer agents going away? And what about the buyer agent commissions? Who's going to pay for that? And what about the real estate market? Is everything completely doomed? Guys, these might be the headlines that you have been seeing circulating the news world with these big buzzwords talking about the National Association of Realtors lawsuit, which just settled for $418 million. Okay, I'm trying to keep it really brief on what you need to know about the lawsuit and how this affects you as a homeowner if you ever decide to sell your house. Let's get into it. Okay, so basically the National Association of Realtors got sued with a bunch of other large brokerages, basically saying that agents were conspiring to price fix, forcing sellers to pay 5 to 6% in agent commissions. 3% that goes to the buyer's agent, 3% that goes to the seller's agent. And the sellers believe that it is the duty of the seller to pay only one commission, which is only to the listing agent, and that they shouldn't be required to pay a commission to the buyer's agent, and that it wasn't disclosed properly and all of that kind of stuff. I can honestly say, as boots in the ground for the last almost 10 years I've been doing real estate here, I do not feel that agents were conspiring in any way. I think that it has always been a negotiable piece where you could pay a buyer's agent whatever you want. However, if you pay them nothing, they're probably not going to show your house. Okay, so bottom line, this lawsuit settled in favor of the class action lawsuit, and now there's new rules that are going to come out as a result of this starting this July. The market is going to change as we know it starting in July on how buyers agents operate, and I want to break that down for you, okay? So what's going to happen is buyer agents are going to be required to have a written agreement with any buyer that they ever show homes to. So there's no more casually calling up your friend, hey, can you open up this property? If you want to get inside a home, you have to have a signed written agreement. On that written agreement, it's going to say how much you are going to pay your buyer's agent, right? And so typically in the past, a buyer agent would see on the listing that the sellers are paying 2.5% to the buyer's agent. But what if that listing says that they're only willing to pay 1%? Well, now you as the buyer would be required to cover that additional 1.5%, or maybe they're not paying anything. And you're going to be required as the buyer to pay 2.5% to your buyer's agent. And guys, on a house around here, that's like $15,000. Can you see what kind of issues are going to happen as a result of this? I think you could already start. Many people can barely get 5% down saved up. And so now, could you imagine going from $20,000 down for their cash to close and adding a buyer agent commission of $15,000? It's going to be very difficult. And so I think there's going to be a lot of buyers who maybe try and represent themselves if we're not able to figure this out. Buyers may go directly to the seller to see if maybe the listing agent will represent them. And now you kind of have a dual agency, and there could be a problem, a conflict of interest there if they're not represented fairly. Bottom line, there are a few predictions that I think is going to take place. There's one of 4 ways in which I think this is going to go. But most likely, the number one way I think it's going to happen is it's just going to be a change in structure on how buyer agents are paid. Sellers still have the right to pay a buyer agent commission. It's just going to be listed as a seller credit. This is one option that you're able to do. So that's option 1, is you just see in the agent remarks that the sellers are offering a seller credit of 2.5%, and that's the way the buyer agents are going to get paid. Option number 2 is on every single offer, an agent is going to have to write in their commission. They're going to have to say, hey there, 123 Main Street, I see that you have your house for sale. I'm writing up my offer with all the terms, and then you're going to see them writing in their commission as a term of the offer. This can get a little bit hard because if the sellers aren't willing to pay a commission, then the buyer's got to pay it. And what if the buyers don't have that money? We're going to have to figure that out when this all happens starting this July. Number 3 is buyers might represent themselves. Maybe they go online and they type in a little fill out your own contract here, and they try to submit it because they can't afford one. They can't afford an agent. And what's going to happen there, I think, is a lot of lawsuits, right? They don't know what to look for. They might buy a house that's crappy, and they get really upset and try to sue the sellers. That's going to create some issues we'll have to figure out. And then the last one is maybe buyers go directly to the listing agent and say, hey, will you represent me? And now the listing agent is representing both the seller and they're representing the buyer. And I will let you know right now, many agents keep a dual agency away from them with like a 9-foot pole because it's already illegal in many states. And it's the number one way that real estate agents get sued is by maybe favoring the seller over the buyer, and then the deal closes and the buyer says, hey, you didn't tell me about this thing, and there's an issue because you're trying to serve two masters, right? So bottom line, I think ultimately there's going to be a testing period over the next 6 months from July to the rest of the year on how this is all going to go down. There are going to be some houses that go on the market and they're going to test it and say, maybe I don't need to pay a buyer agent commission. And I predict that those houses are going to sit and they're not going to sell. And those people are probably going to have to go back to the drawing board and maybe offer some type of commission. Because who's going to show a house where nobody's getting paid, right? So we're going to see how this all shakes out. One of these four are going to take place, probably all of them, but then one is going to get solidified as just the normal way of doing business. So if you guys have any questions, if you're planning on selling your home this year, talk to me. I'd love to kind of dive more into the details on how we could strategize best. But I am always a resource for you guys and just wanted to make myself available. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you guys have a great week.